Welcome everybody to Casual Conversation. We were on break last week and it's great to be back this week. And we have a very special guest today who I've known, gosh, I can't even remember how long we've known each other, a couple of years now. Rosina, welcome to the show.
Hi there. Nice to see you again. I think it's been more like 4 or 5 years. I remember when I first met you, it was at some conference back when we used to do conferences in person.
Live in person. And we're lucky that we happen to live 2 towns away from each other. So we get to see each other occasionally. And, a friend and also somebody that, I really respect in the brain injury space and what you're doing to bring a new technology to this space. But I wanted to start, because it's Casual Conversations, with where you were born and sort of your early years and whether science and technology, where it drifted into your.
Okay, so I was actually born in Wimbledon in the United Kingdom. And I came over here. My parents brought me over here when I was 3 years old, myself and 2 of my sisters at that time. There are now 5 kids altogether. 2 were born in the United States. And my dad was a doctor, and he came over here first. And then my mom came over with the kids 6 months later. We grew up in a small town called Beaver Dam, Wisconsin, right in the heart of the Midwest. And my interest in the medical field really comes from my parents, my dad, and, even my mom was always very interested in medicine, but my dad's a doctor, family practitioner, both, basically like the local country doctor, and in a very, very small town. Knew so many people in the town, had delivered their babies, and then in subsequent years delivered their babies.
Wow,
So
that's amazing.
It was so nice. Yeah.
Such a disappearing model. That's awesome that you grew up with that. So yeah. Did you take science in high school?
I did science, math. I loved math and science, and I continued with that in my undergrad years. I went to MIT for my bachelor's and master's. I got a degree in mechanical engineering, and then continued on with a PhD, came back to the Midwest to Northwestern and did a PhD in biomedical engineering. So I've always been very, very interested in science.
And how are those spaces, being a woman in those spaces at the different times? Were you encouraged or?
No. So, especially back when I went to school, MIT was really a very male school. And the interesting thing is as you progress and you go to your master's and then your PhD, there's just fewer and fewer women. So when I was an undergrad back then, MIT was 25% women. Now I think it's 50-50 in the undergrad. And in the graduate program, it was 11% women. So just very few women. And then my PhD back at Northwestern was actually a little better. There were more women. I think MIT in particular back then was very male dominated. And then what's interesting is that after you leave school and you go into, your job, you begin to see the same thing happening, especially as you become more senior. Very, very, very interesting.
And what was your first, what would you say was your first real job that you dug into in this space?
So in this space, the first real job that I dug into is this company. My first real job after college, after getting my PhD, was at McKinsey. I was there for 6.5 years in the healthcare practice. They have a special program for bringing in people that don't have MBAs. Back then it was called the Advanced Professional Degree Program, APD. And it was for people with an MD, a PhD, something different than an MBA. And they took you through a mini MBA. They literally called it that. Yes. And then threw you into healthcare projects. And so I was helping to give advice to biotech, medical device, pharmaceutical companies in the healthcare practice at McKinsey for 6.5 years. And then
but you got to see a lot.
I got to see a huge range. And my first project, I remember this, was a rehabilitation, basically in the rehabilitation field.
You see different business models and different ways people approached it. Do you think, and how did that, in that space, you're now, thinking about what your next job would be? What inspired you then to take the next type of job?
So it's very interesting because you do get exposed to a lot of big companies and a huge range of products. And the next thing I did after that was really the same thing, but in a much smaller company, my own company, giving advice to pharma, biotech, med device. And through that, I began to think, I want to do this for myself. I actually want to build something that's going to make a difference. And I want to go to the FDA and I want to understand at a very personal level, what does it take to get a product through FDA? What are all of the things that you have to do? What does it take to get a CPT code? After McKinsey and doing my own thing as a management consultant, I had this itch to basically do something very real myself, because consulting, you come in, you do a project, you help them, and then you don't get to see the end result. And I wanted to see the end result.
And why this? What made you? I mean, I can imagine you could have done any number of different projects. What brought you to this one?
So my PhD was actually on the sensory motor control of muscle. So I had a little bit of interest in the central nervous system and how muscle was controlled and what happens to patients that are somewhat debilitated. But most importantly, my sister is a neurosurgeon, Dr. Rosina Samadani, and she was doing work on trying to basically understand and develop a very good outcome measure for patients with specific cranial nerve deficits. And that's the basis of the technology that is in our company, Oculogica. It is a technology that assesses different cranial nerve deficits. That cranial nerve deficit in the first indication is manifested as a concussion, but that's the real basis of the technology. So it was my original interest in science and medicine and the central nervous system, and then her coming in and really developing the early stages of what would eventually be a product to diagnose concussion, my understanding of the business world, and that all coming together to become Oculogica.
And the two halves of that puzzle, because I do see people in the medical space that don't have the business side, and then the business space that go off on these tangents where you don't have that. I've seen both groups kind of pass each other in the night, so it's nice.
That's such a good way to put it, because if you come in with business and no healthcare, and you think you can get into healthcare, you're in for a surprise. Everyone says, oh, my industry is different. Healthcare really, truly is different. And the concussion and brain injury world is even more special, even more different. And if you come in from the pure medical side without any business acumen or experience, you're also going to struggle. You're really going to have, a challenge in front of you. We're in a tough sliver of the even the medical device industry, of even the medical field. We're in a very tough place.
Absolutely. I would just guess that there's been, 10 times more money lost in this space than ever made.
Oh my gosh. Yes. On therapeutics, on diagnostics, on physicians and healthcare practitioners trying different things. Absolutely. Completely agree with you.
And just the amount of times that I've been asked to look at products, which, for $300 an hour, I'll look at your product. And I'm going to tell you what I think. And I'm just right, and it's a small world. So if something's good, it rises to the top. If something is this brain injury space is so tiny, it is so small. And somebody told me this, and I pass it on, that brain injury is the, unwanted stepchild of neurology. So we're often we're off in our own corner to begin with. We all know each other, and, successes and failures are quickly passed along in the system. So what year was it where, the light bulb went off in your head and like, yes, I want to do this?
So I would say 2014, 2015. So Uzma founded the company in 2013. And I was just very much on the side and, helping her out every once in a while with some business ideas and thoughts and probably maybe unsolicited advice. Just saying, you should probably do this, you should probably do this. And then the board that she had at the time began looking for a CEO, and that I was helping them trying to think about who could be CEO of this company. If we're really going to do something here, then, we should put a professional in place. And then as I became more involved, it became clear to, I think, everybody that, I should be the CEO of the company. I had the appropriate experience. I had the same incentives. I really wanted to make a difference in this field. And, Uzma trusted me, obviously. We're sisters, so we know that we're on the same page there. And this is, pretty much the exact challenge I was looking for presented to me right in front of me. I think that, ironically, the only qualm we had was going into business together as sisters. You just don't want to do that lightly.
So what was 2015, your sisters developed the technology, you have this idea. And I think it's important because a lot of people come up with ideas like, I made this on my kitchen table. This will, so one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on is to just talk about that trajectory, so you have a MD with technology and an application. It's 2015. What's the next gate that you go through that high five?
So the idea may very well be the easiest part of the entire process. Like what we had to do next was go raise some money and go talk to the FDA about what are we going to do here. And as you know, the challenge in concussion is that there is no gold standard. There is no clinical reference standard. So how do you design a clinical study when there is no clinical reference standard that everybody agrees to?
And there's no definition of concussion either.
And there's no definition.
I don't know if everybody knows that. There's at least 40 or 50 approved concussion definitions, depending on which organization you ask.
Yes. And so we went to FDA, we had that discussion, and this is a whole saga because your review team doesn't necessarily stay the same. And our review team did not stay the same. Actually the lead clinical person on the review team actually passed away of a heart attack in the middle of our entire, work with the FDA on this thing. And so the thing that you agreed to at the beginning of your foray into, okay, we're going to do a clinical study on concussion, it actually changed midway because we had a whole new review team at FDA, especially on the clinical front. And so that is, if you've got this, on the back of a napkin idea for, I'm going to do this in concussion or brain injury, that's what we did. We decided to go to FDA first. Now, there are a lot of people that told us, you're never going to make it through FDA. There's no clinical reference standard. The study's going to fail. It's going to be really tough. It's a de novo. We didn't have a predicate device to follow. So those are longer already. It's a 12-month submission process. It's definitely not for the faint of heart. The entire thing is not for the faint of heart, but doing a de novo in concussion, it was, I think a lot of people, I know a lot of people just thought we were insane.
And so that process takes you to 2017 at that point?
Yeah, so we submitted December 2017, and I don't think I slept that entire month. I was up at 4 a.m. writing, and because I wrote the submission with my team, but I wrote a lot of the submission, and we got the clearance 1 year later, December 28th, 2018. So it took almost exactly 1 year from the date that we submitted. And that's because it's a de novo. 510Ks are faster.
And de novo means it's the first time something like this has been used and you couldn't base it upon another product that had a track record.
There's no predicate, so you can't do a 510K. You have to do a de novo. You have to say, okay, we're establishing what this thing is going to be. And now others have, one other has followed us, and others I'm sure are trying to follow us. They're trying to use us as a predicate.
So let's explain, do you have a graphic of the device?
I do. The latest version of the device. I've actually got a little video if you would like to see that.
Sure.
And so this is not the early version that we got cleared. This is the 4th generation product. And we just got this cleared. So we've had 4 clearances in 3 years. And this is the latest version. I'm going to make you guys small so that you can see this. And this is just a small little snapshot of it. So that's the beautiful new device that we have. We're just calling it the EyeBOX. And we watch the patient's eyes as they watch this video move around the screen. And, as you can see, it's moving very slowly. And they do that for 220 seconds. So it's a pretty painless process. And as soon as they're done, and she's going to be done here in just a second or so, the test is completed, and instantly you get a report readout. And it's really that simple.
One of the difficult things that people have struggled with, both practitioners and patients, that when you're having your eyes tested, and we've had Tina Masters on the show twice now talking about the eyes or the window to the brain, and if you're testing somebody, you're not only the tool, and you're the person using the tool, you're also trying to measure what you're seeing. So you're taking, several roles. So this is where the beauty, I think, that comes in with EyeBOX. So would you explain to our audience how it's better than a person with a popsicle stick?
Yeah, well, so as you can imagine, there's lots of different ways to, take a look at somebody's, and, some people use a popsicle stick, some people use a finger and say, follow my finger. And depending, like if you go to Tina Master, she's going to diagnose you absolutely correctly and accurately. If you go to somebody who just got trained on concussions and they're in the emergency room and there's all this other stuff going on, I hope you get an accurate assessment. The chances are that you went in on a different day or even to a different practitioner, you'd get a slightly different assessment. It's not going to be consistent across practitioners. And that's one thing that having a device does, is that it takes it out of the hands of somebody that may not have that experience. It also just makes it very consistent across practitioners. And that's extremely important and extremely valuable. So we've got a device at a small hospital in Missouri, and it's actually in the orthopedic surgery department, and they see the concussions. What they would like is actually to have it at the point of triage, at the point of entry into the system, so that they can see what the EyeBOX scan looks like right when they come in, and then see it again 3-7 days later, because all they get when somebody comes into the system is a subjective assessment. I think this person has a concussion. I did the follow my finger test. What's the measurement? What's the statement that you make about the follow my finger test? Oh, they're not following. It's a very subjective statement.
And let's break it down for people that haven't been a part of that. As you're moving your finger, or as you're moving a pen across the eye of the patient, you're looking for stuttering, shaking,
jumps. Yeah.
You're looking for this jump. You're looking for, do the two eyes track together? Do they track apart? And you're counting basically flutters of the eye.
Yeah. Yeah. Blinks. You're looking for jumps, blinks, and disconjugacy. That's a lot to be looking for, very, very under, sort of like a stressful situation.
And how much of that does the EyeBOX do for the clinician?
So it does all of that. We're measuring at a very high frequency, 500 hertz, and it's a very high quality camera. We're using infrared to illuminate the pupils, and we're measuring each eye's coordinates separately, not together. So it's not monocular tracking, it's binocular tracking. So you can just do it at this minute level that the human eye just can't see. It's just not possible.
And what can, do you need a baseline to have this be accurate?
No, so
where
that's
in the
the
system is it useful?
That's the interesting thing about it, is that you don't need a baseline. And, as you know, baselines have all of these other issues with them. They can be gamed. Kids don't like to take them. It's a boring test for them. They kind of dread baseline day. Their practitioners aren't really thrilled about it. And baselines are sometimes correlated with GPA, other socioeconomic factors. Concussion should not be a subjective, how well can you think test, because there's so many other factors that go into how well you can think, even on any given day, even in the same individual. This does not need a baseline. It is a measure of how well your cranial nerves are functioning. And it's not compared to your baseline. It's compared to what is normal for any human being with respect to how their eyes, generally move. We're looking for gross aberrations.
And then, so where are you currently with the product?
So the product that I just showed you is commercialized, got cleared by FDA. I guess it's been 4 months now. We launched, thank you. We're thrilled. We launched last month. It's rolling off of the manufacturing floor next week. Yeah, it's very, very exciting. We've got obviously some, early product out there for our account executives, but the first shipments will be going out next week to customers.
And what type of clinics do you expect will, and the gamut, and we know the gamut. We know that, there's free clinics to, regular GP to, walk-in clinics to ERs to specialty concussion. There's the entire gamut out there. So where would you like to see this initially?
Yeah. So this is the beauty of the concussion field, is that it's almost like a Harvard Business School case, right? Like, how do you develop a go-to-market strategy in a field where everyone and their sister could be seeing these patients? We've got neurologists, emergency room physicians, pain medicine and rehabilitation, neurologists, orthopedic surgeons, neurosurgeons rather. It's just an unbelievably broad spectrum of specialties and all of the therapists. Where do we go? Well, we go where our strengths are. We're an acute, diagnostic for now. That's our on label. We are within 7 days of injury. We're for the situation where you don't know if the person has a concussion. So a lot of these places, they already know the person has a concussion. They may still want to do this test and they may want to track and see how well they're doing. But our sweet spot for now is, does this person actually have a concussion or not? So it's the 0-1, yes, no. Help me make that assessment so that I can then get them to the appropriate care. So, I'm not going to reveal exactly where we're targeting, because I actually think that's going to be one of the things that makes a difference in this field of who's successful and who's not. Right. It's such a tough problem, Katherine. It really is a business school case study. this is not a trivial problem. And if it were, it would have been solved by now.
Right. And there's literally carcasses along the road
Yes.
of, the next greatest thing to be the next greatest things, in-home product, a pediatric product. I mean, it's just been all
I'm
over
sure
the place.
you have seen so much. I'm sure you've seen a peacock of variety. Yeah.
Good way to describe it. Yeah. And so you're cleared to say yes, concussion, no concussion. What about, should this person be driving? Can it give any more diagnostic about sort of next steps for treatment or reliability to put this person behind a car wheel?
Yeah. So, as you know, there's this hypothesis and, most likely even more than a hypothesis right now that there are 6 subtypes of concussion. That's something that Mickey Collins talks about in a super eloquent way.
The 6 trajectories of concussion, Mickey Collins, everybody should read it.
Yeah, or just go, Google his little YouTube video and you'll get it in a minute or so, that, the 6 subtypes of concussion that he talks about on the UPMC website. And it's very, very interesting. It would be really beautiful to be able to delineate out, okay, not only yes, no, you've got a concussion, but here's the subtype that you have, because that's going to then lead you to the appropriate therapy. And we believe that we can. And at the grossest level, we're already doing it. And the way that we're doing it is that we've got this box score that varies between 0 and 20. And if it's actually shown as a negative on the ocular motor front, but they've still got symptoms, that they don't have an ocular motor deficit, they've got something else. They've got neck pain, or they've got the anxiety mood. And you need to, get them to the appropriate therapy for those things. You treat them for the neck pain. And in some cases, voila, they're recovered. We've got a doctor doing that. Uzma's doing that, with some of the patients that she sees. She treats them for the neck pain and they're recovered.
How many sites do you have using it currently?
Yeah, so we've got somewhere between 40 and 50 sites using it.
And is that something they can go on your website and find, a provider near me? How do people engage, or is it just, a process by when the product rolls out?
Yeah, we'll eventually have that. I love that idea of, find the provider near me. When we've got more sites out there, we would love to do that. We would love to do that.
I mean, and the eyes have always been something, especially with my own experience with my son, who had ocular issues and reading caused headaches, but we kept him out of school for 5 months, which is how I kind of got into this space, because I literally had done everything wrong. And I figured, well, so it was 2008 and, I've done everything wrong. I might as well learn about what's out there. Yeah. And his issue was ocular, but we stayed at home in a dark room waiting for his headache to go away.
Yeah, which is, awful. And that is the antiquated way to diagnose concussion.
I'm just looking at some questions in the chat.
Yeah, and I'm seeing some advice too. Use storytelling to what emotion will inspire them to act.
We've got a very, very, very intellectual group out there.
Yes, I love it.
A question about reimbursement to provider, different than manual assessment. Where is the product with that? And I know that's a whole process too.
That's a whole process too. So after FDA, we went to the AMA and we got a CPT code for this procedure. You don't get a CPT code for a product, you get it for a procedure. This procedure obviously did not exist before because the product was a de novo with FDA. We were successful in getting the AMA to assign a CPT code to this. We're starting off as a category 3 code. That's very typical for the first CPT code that you get. And we will eventually apply for a category 1 code.
And just what do those codes mean?
So that code means that when you conduct the exam, you can submit using that code and get reimbursed for the exam. For the EyeBOX scan.
All right, I'm just well, there's so many questions. Let me ask one more question and then we'll go looking at the chat.
Okay.
So what's next? Like you're rolling out next week. What's next?
We're rolling out next week. So this year for us is all about commercialization and, the things like figuring out our value proposition, what emotion will inspire our potential customers to act. We need to figure that out. We need to understand what value we are delivering, what job are we doing, as Clay Christensen says, for our customers. And that is what 2022 is about for us, is proving out the actual commercialization model for our product.
Let's just look through the questions.
Yeah. Functional EEG provided by Vox Neuro. I don't know Vox Neuro. I do know about EEG. There's a lot of EEG products out there, several of them. Right now, EyeBOX is cleared for within 7 days since injury. Vox Neuro is not cleared for concussion by FDA. I know that because I know every device that is cleared for concussion by FDA. It may reveal long-term neurological issues years later. That's fascinating to me. I don't know anything about them, so I can't really speak to that particular product.
I have one here. If certain cranial nerves are impinged by brain tumors or vascular malformations, could this system aid in identifying those lesions?
Yes, we do think it can. It's obviously not on label, it's off label. That's something that we've got in research. But we do have, we've got actually active research in areas like that. And then somebody said, could you provide? Yeah, so we've got, you could send our website to anybody, oculogica.com, OCULOGICA.com. We're ready. We are, we're out there and we're trying to get more customers. So would love to have this group's help in getting the word out. Thank you, Bridget, for that question.
If anybody wants to raise their hand and ask a question, and it's very rare that we have somebody with a product on, but I certainly have been along the ride with you all and,
yes,
believe in the product that you have.
Yeah, Catherine's been there. I think I've known you since before we got the clearance. Well before.
Oh, I was pre-clearance. I was definitely pre-clearance. Are there any questions out there from the audience?
So the time window for use, so it's within the on-label usage is within 7 days since injury, Jean-Claude, and we've got publications up to 22 weeks since injury. So it has been used in research and Tina Master is one of those people that's used it in a research setting, as have a number of others. David Howell is another one that's using it in a research setting. And so, yeah, it's in the 7 days is on the FDA label. And then mild versus post-concussive syndrome, that's such an interesting question. So some of the work that we're doing is to try and understand if we can see early markers of which patients are more likely to suffer from PCS. And I think it's now called PCSI, or it's called something else, PPCS. Yeah,
persistent concussion symptoms or persistent post-concussion symptoms, but we want to end with symptom rather than syndrome.
Syndrome. Okay, thank you. And then how to overcome the obstacle of lack of knowledge and general acceptance of eye involvement in concussion. That's an obstacle that we face every single day. I don't know if there is general acceptance of anything within concussion. I don't know if there's a general acceptance of any particular, modality. This is a pretty active and engaged field on different theories. It is not available in Canada as of now. I was actually just talking with a Canadian potential partner yesterday. So we may be able to do that sometime soon, but it's not right now. And when does the 7-day clock start? Yeah, you're right. Some concussions aren't diagnosed within the 7 days. It's 7 days since injury, according to our FDA label. And we're just really careful about talking about what's on label versus off label. I will say that the field has some poorly behaved entities that don't really care about FDA label. We care about it. And that's why we bothered to go do this in the long, somewhat painful, really tough way. We thought that that's the right way. We also thought that that's what brain injured people deserve. They deserve an objective diagnostic that's gone through the rigor of clinical validation and an FDA process. The entire field deserves so much better. And we don't want to be the only product out there. We want there to be a multimodal set of assessments, but we want them to all have gone through the FDA.
Yeah, there is a very sad track record in this space. And I think also of people using off-label things and charging an incredible amount of money for them, and,
Yeah.
making financial victims, scattered along the roadside as they go.
Yeah. There's a
And
question here, Katherine, about the difference between FDA cleared and FDA approved. So that has to do with the class of product that you have. We are a class 2 device, and any concussion diagnostic is going to be a class 2 device, most likely. And FDA approval is for a PMA. Those are often drugs, biologics. There's a lot of confusion about FDA clearance versus FDA approval. We go to great lengths to use the right language. We've got an FDA clearance. We're not going to have a competitor or anybody with a device, a diagnostic that's going to have an approval. That's not the correct language. And so we do see the words FDA approval. Sometimes reporters get the words wrong when they even talk about our device. We really try ourselves to use the correct language. We're a little bit nerdy that way when it comes to those technical differences.
I like the nerd in you. The nerd in me appreciates the nerd in you. I think that's one of the reasons why we're friends.
Vice versa.
So, and I think that so long this has been needed, because I think this eye piece is missing. And I think too often people with concussions go out and drive cars, and, there are secondary injuries that happened. So I do think that this is something that really needs to be checked up front, right away, and have access to people. From what Tina said, if I remember correctly, you do not see sex differences in this.
Yeah, we don't see gender differences. I think we see gender differences in concussion, but we don't see gender differences as of yet in their actual eye tracking metrics. We're actually right now doing a large normals study just on normals, and we're going to see if we do see sex differences. You'd probably want to do it by age. There's so many other things that are going into like sex differences, because girls and boys sometimes mature at different, levels there, or rather rates and ages. So it's a tough study to do, but right now we're not seeing gender differences in eye tracking metrics. That's not to say that there are not gender differences in actual concussions, based on neck strength and other things like that.
Definitely, that's right up our alley. But in the eye section, from what I've talked with Tina Masters, she was not seeing that, which is great. And we definitely, that's a positive. And as an organization that looks for sex and gender differences, when we don't find them, that's equally valuable.
And we don't see differences in race. We don't see differences, on those other really important dimensions either. And, like the kind of practices of race norming and all of that is just very disturbing. And having to correlate your score with your GPA, that's a really problematic way to be conducting any test. I just really strongly disagree with any of that.
I was in middle school, I think, when I took some test and it says soup is too tureen. And I knew that strange word because of an auntie that, had a box of soup tureens had been dropped off. But I actually wrote it on a piece of paper. And I remember taking it home and go, the only reason I know what a tureen is because of,
Yeah.
Aunt Susie and that old box. How is that, something that we're supposed to be, norming questions on for people?
Yeah. Like, please, that's just, it's not right. It's not right. The number of people I've talked to about, well, frankly, the impact test and, how variable it is at the baseline for different socioeconomic levels, different parts of the country, different, counties. It's a little dangerous.
Or who's been on Instagram or YouTube and watched all the screenshots. So
yes,
this is something that you can't game.
Yeah, this is something you can't game. It is a test of your, functionality, your physiological functionality.
There's another question in the chat box about price point and what you see this entering the medical system.
So on the price point, I mean, I'm happy to, take that offline and talk with anybody about that. We're trying to make it as accessible as possible. We were using an off-the-shelf camera within our first earlier generations, and we brought the COGS of our device way down by developing our own internal camera. We're pretty dedicated to making this as accessible as possible, but I'm happy to talk with anybody. And then, is the EyeBOX only for diagnosis? Yeah, it's for diagnosis. It does not have a role that we have formally, laid out in assessing the benefit from vision therapy. You may be able to see that in some of the metrics and the traces that we deliver, but we don't make any claims regarding that.
Where along the trajectory of like the Glasgow Coma Scale does this? This is for quote MTBI at this point, as opposed to
MAR. It's for MTBI. It's for the upper end of the Glasgow Coma Scale. Yeah, absolutely. If you can't open your eyes, you won't be able to take the test.
And literally, it's just leaning forward and putting your chin in that very comfortable space.
Yeah. So if you have, when you go to the eye doctor and you're taking any of the typical eye exams, it's going to feel like that. You put your chin in a chin rest, and it's actually potentially even more freeing than some of those. You don't have any of the other stuff around your head. And you have nothing like pushing up against your eyes. It's just your chin in a chin rest. We really didn't want to have goggles or anything like that touching the face, because those can exacerbate concussion symptoms. When you lose your peripheral vision, they can induce vertigo, nausea. We actually, in our clinical trials, we had people, when they were being consented, they would ask, do I have to put a pair of goggles on to take this test? Because I really don't want to do that the way that I feel right now. And so that's something that we really tried to stay away from that.
Yeah, no, I put on the virtual reality goggles, and even, in a point where I'm not symptomatic, I get sick, I'll fall over. It's, and I did the first one that was space. It was fascinating. I was the greatest time. And I stayed in there for like, I don't know, 8 or 9 minutes. I was so ill after being, but it was so like, I was like, I wanted to, to stay with that piece, but
the virtual reality glasses, they can make you feel sick, and so you don't want to do that to somebody who just had, blow to the head. Somebody wrote to me directly and said I should look into renting the units to providers rather than selling a monthly or annual payment. That's exactly what we do. We do that. That's how we're doing it. We offer that you can buy it, but we also offer the monthly or annual payment. And then
Rebecca, Rebecca had asked anyone can unmic and ask a question too.
Hi, I'm sorry to interrupt, and I don't want to take up too much time of the recording. And so if my answer needs to be, or my question needs to be answered in another method, that's fine. Hi, I'm Becca. I am a stroke survivor.
Hi.
And I am curious if you could talk a little bit more about why brain injury is the redheaded stepchild of neurology and what we can do as survivors to change that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Katherine, you probably have some perspective on this.
When a pharma comes out and they can make money off us, like I had breast cancer and, $325,000 worth of drugs went through my body in an 11-month period. It made, I always felt like I should put something, across, brought to you by, there isn't a lot of money made in this space. Large hospitals that put together these clinics, they try to condense it into one day so they can have all the doctors they need kind of in a line and have people through it. It's very intensive, having different specialties. You don't know which specialty you need for which person. And, you have the Mickey Collins where you have, you come in for the couple of days and you have everybody all together. It's a lost leader for giant hospitals.
Yeah.
And people that
and for so many clinics, they see it because they want to offer it to their patients, but they don't make money on seeing concussion patients.
We have one doctor that I'm a friend with. He has 2 orthopedic surgeons for every 1 concussion doctor, and that's how he can make his concussion clinics work.
Yeah. And orthopedic surgeons, their procedures make a lot of money. And healthcare, it is about clinical outcomes, but it is also, they have to ask the question about how am I going to make money on this thing? Otherwise they can't survive. The healthcare practitioners can't survive.
And I think the clinicians that are in the space are passionate about it, either from a family member or a connection. Almost everybody that's been on this show has some, human connection to brain injury in one way or another, because it's certainly not a fame or fortune space to do anything. It profoundly needs more advance. And most of I think 0% of the pharmaceuticals have transferred from mice to men. Unfortunately, I truly believe we need a middle animal, and we need to move from mice to Candace Floyd out in Utah. I'm on the pig model, as the folds of the brain are close to us. And I know, talking about animal research is highly controversial, but, the pharma is not going very far. So,
and the
therapeutic, our money.
Those therapeutics will not evolve until we've got a really good diagnostic. They're tied to each other. And so you need the objective diagnostics in order to have the outcome measures for the therapeutics. That's why the therapeutics have failed. If you don't have it's like comparing yourself against Jell-O. When you look at the clinical reference standard of concussion, it's every single patient is different. Every clinical reference standard yields at something very, very different. How in the world can you possibly get a therapeutic through a clinical study that way? We actually think that we can be a part of that. So breast cancer. Now, when you get breast cancer, the first thing you do is you get a DNA test to find out if you've got the BRCA gene or not, because then you can get triage to appropriate therapy. We think that you should be able to do the same thing with an EyeBOX scan. If we can characterize the nature of your brain injury early on, then we can get you to the right therapy. But also, if that's part of a therapeutic clinical study, we may be able to see metrics that are correlated with the patients that are responsive to a particular therapy versus the ones that are not. And if we can do that, then we can say, okay, the people with this type of profile for their brain injury, they're going to be responsive to this therapy. And we can finally get a therapy across the finish line. Hopefully that makes sense to people.
Absolutely. And I think that's where Mickey Collins talking about the 6 trajectories was really sort of revolutionary. I was at Harvard when he was presenting the paper, and you have these 6 different ways to break up a mild traumatic brain injury. And depending on which of the components you have in his model, it shows which type of therapeutic avenues you go down, and some respond to exercise and some don't respond to exercise. And that was the piece in concussion, to try to create subcategories within. And for those of you that concussed before 2008, there used to be grade 1, 2, 3, and 4 concussion, which Bob Cantu came up with because there wasn't anything better out there. And it was based on loss of consciousness, less than a minute, over a minute, I think a minute to 3, 3 to 5, and then 5 and over. And it was based on loss of consciousness. And I've talked to Bob about it. He's such a sweet person. And just wrote me a really nice note thanking me for the show, and should have him on. And he was talking about putting together this grading system just to try to put something out there. And it turns out it really didn't hold water. And that diet, if you're basing mild traumatic brain injury on loss of consciousness, you're missing 90% of cases. So if you look back at research before 2006, 2007, you're looking at, they may have based the criteria on loss of consciousness, which meant they missed 90% of. So you can't line things up.
Huge issues with the way that these studies are designed because they don't have a clinical reference standard. Can I show some charts, Katherine?
Sure.
Okay.
And when I went to NIH, I went to a sex and gender workshop on other illnesses where you take a test, you have it. They give you a pharmaceutical, they cure it. You no longer have it. We don't have that in brain injury.
So this whole idea of characterizing a person's brain injury, Katherine gets hit, I get hit, our brain injuries are going to be different. And our hypothesis is that there are a number of metrics that we can put out that are going to characterize your brain injury. And eventually those metrics will point us in the direction of the correct therapy. So we've got in this data set that we have right here, concussed and normals, hundreds of them. And each of these metrics behave differently. You could have a concussed person that has the metric performing out here or out here. That's going to be a very different type of concussed person. And we've got 27 different metrics that are different in concussed and normal. And individual concussed people have a different profile of these metrics. So we think that that's going to be the key to understanding how do we delineate out these different types of concussion? And I don't know if they're going to line up with what Mickey Collins is saying are the 6 different subtypes. There might be some other, something else that comes out of here. There might be 2 or there might be 3. But the important thing is that if we can get to a clinical study in which we look at the eye tracking metrics and the therapeutic, we might be able to pull out the subset of patients that are responding to the therapeutic based on their metrics profile.
Absolutely. And having a mother that had multiple sclerosis 40 years ago, where it was just, we think it's MS, and that was where we were waiting for whether, that they would break MS down into different types and that there would be pharmaceuticals and my mother lived before that time. So, I see my generation with much better prognosis because their subtypes, their sub therapies that you can have at different points. So, I really do believe that this is not only going to help people at point of entry into the system, but build upon the knowledge base we have. I am excited to watch.
Me too.
Any other questions out there?
May is just thanking you, Katherine, which is so nice.
Thanks, May. And I was talking about Jeffrey Manley, track TBI.
Yeah, and the identification of up to 20 or 25 different. So they're using eye tracking in a couple of those locations, but I don't know if he's trying, I don't even think he knows about these 27 metrics that we're looking at. I'm sure he doesn't. In fact, would love to see if they correlate with his 20 or 25 different MTBI subclassifications. Isn't that interesting that we've got 27 metrics and he's got 25 different subclassifications? I wonder if that's a coincidence.
That's really interesting. And I think as people start working together and these larger studies, because I don't think you can have an N of 34 and come up with something that's going to apply to others. But how do you pull together, 34 people to represent male, female, race?
Yeah, you can't do it. You need hundreds of people. I see studies proposed all the time, 34 people, 50 people. I'm like, good luck. You're not going to be able to get anywhere with that. It's just not going to work.
Well, I'm really excited to see what next happens with the company, and the Oculogica is behind on the screen behind you.
Oh, yes, it is. Here it is.
For the spelling. Such a nice name too for a company. So, you know, what's as a human, what's next for you? Like what you know, what do you want next?
This like immediately this weekend, going to Austin, American Medical Society of Sports Medicine. You know, Katherine, it's really just, we've got a big challenge in front of us this year with trying to figure this out. And then there will be the next challenge of, okay, now we figured that out. Like, how do we make it grow? But I guess also just stepping back and keeping perspective on what we're trying to do. That like we're really trying to move the needle for patients. And so that helps because it's a big thing, right? Like we're really trying to make a big difference in a very tough field. And just every once in a while, stepping back and keeping that perspective helps you, because this is so tough on some days. It's just, you think, okay, am I insane for being in this field?
And you're doing it in a pandemic too. So it
Yes.
hasn't been the easiest at launch. Well, you know, it'll be great to see you at conferences and, you know, see more people talking about it and how it can use. I appreciate you coming on, and it's been really exciting to watch. And you know, I just want to repeat again that the road behind you is littered with companies and products and ideas and clinics, and you know, and not for lack of funding. I mean, there's been funding thrown around.
We've received a pittance compared to others. We got 4 FDA clearances in 3 years in under $9 million. We're really proud of that. We've been extremely scrappy. We've been really efficient with how we've used our capital. And we think that we've done it, and obviously we think we've done it in the right way. You know, we've really tried to keep our head above a little bit of the morass out there and said, no, we're going to go with an FDA cleared product. We're going to talk about it in a way that is accurate. We're rule followers, and it shows.
Well, the geek in me does appreciate the geek and rule follower in you. And I do, you know, you do stand out as a person and as a company above the morass out there. And I'm excited, you know, it's getting closer to being used. So thank you so much for sharing your, you know, your journey as a woman and as a CEO, and how I think it's really important, that story about how business comes together with medical. So
thank you so much for having me. And I just have to say, I enjoy our friendship. So I look forward to walking again.
When we get back to the beach.
Yeah, would love to do that.
All right. Take care, everyone. We'll have a show next week, 2 more shows, and then the Brain Injury Task Force meeting the last week of the month. So everybody take care, and we'll have all the recordings, the 5 that you're missing. I just got the tech answer. It was their problem, not mine. And all the videos should be out tomorrow. Thanks so much. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.